Okay, welcome everyone to our panel discussion, which we themed acquisition and processing family history materials at the Harold B. Lee Library. And even though you see right now only two of the panelists, we are still missing one, but we actually had four lined up. Ryan Lee is also not here. He could not participate, but he prepared statements to several of the questions which I prepared ahead of time and which we try to discuss today. And so during the session, I will sporadically insert Ryan's answers where it's fitting or to instigate a discussion on a topic. So first, who are we? So we are all from the Harold B. Lee Library, which is part of Brigham Young University Provo campus. And before we start with our discussion, let's give each panelist, so far as here, the chance to introduce him or herself. And since we are gentlemen, let's start with the lady in our midst. So Lindsey, please unmute yourself and it's your turn.
Thank you, Milan. Hi, everybody. My name is Lindsey Memory. I'm the Department Head of Digital Initiatives and the Digital Content Manager for Harold B. Lee Library. Under my purview are our institutional repository, our digital preservation program, and our online digital asset management repositories for digitized materials of all shapes and sizes and sorts, including family history materials. And so I'll be speaking to the providing digital access and digitization services for family history materials today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lindsey. So Gregg showed up. Gregg, would you go next, please? Unmute yourself and then.
Sure. Hi, I'm Gregg Seppi. I'm curator of the 19th and 20th century Americana collection here in the Harold B. Lee Library in Old Town Perry Special Collections. And I'm sorry, what else should I?
Well, whatever you want to.
And
what is your research interest, for example?
I've done research in, let's see, my first master's was in studying history of medicine. I've also studied history of gender and sexuality in the West, and written a paper about James D. Talmadge's mining experiences, as well as some more general papers about library security and digitization. And I love my job.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Gregg. So now, John, it's your turn to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Milan. My name is John Murphy. I am a manuscripts curator in the L. Tom Perry Special Collections here at BYU. I am responsible for 20th century Western and Mormon manuscript collections. Prior to coming to BYU, I worked at the University of Arizona in Tucson, and I have a graduate degree in history from Brandeis University and a master's degree in library and information science with an archives and special collections focus from Simmons College.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. Sorry for not forgetting forwarding the slides here. So, and I just mentioned we had another curator lined up here, Ryan Lee. And since he couldn't be here, he sent me his credential statement, and I will read it here to you. Ryan Lee is a curator of 19th century Mormon and Western manuscripts in the L. Tom Perry Special Collections at Brigham Young University. He earned a master's degree in library science with a specialization in archives and records management from Indiana University and became an accredited archivist in 2011. Ryan has worked previously for the LDS Church History Library and Indiana University Office of Archives and Records Management. His research interests include archival description, digitization, and access to archival materials, and historical records and research of 19th century Mormonism, Utah, and the American West. So much to him. And the last person in this round of speakers is me. Well, speakers is probably the wrong term for me. I'm the moderator in this round, the one who will ask all these questions here. I am Milan, Pohontsch, a cataloger at the same institution, BYU, and I am specialized in Germanic, Slavic, Celtic, and Scandinavian language materials. I'm also over microforms, and I do some special collection cataloging by chance sometimes. I am also an accredited genealogist in German research, and I serve presently as the chair of ULA's genealogy roundtable. So please feel free to join this roundtable if you are interested in genealogy. And this discussion panel is actually sponsored by the ULA's genealogy roundtable. And for those who don't know me much, before you start guessing, my accent is German, and I apologize for it. I can't change it anymore. And as you probably see on my family name, or just on my name, I have a ton of Slavic ancestry too. So let me stop share screen here. So, well, let's start with the main part of this hour. So first, thank you everyone for showing up here, and I hope you will find the answers to some of the questions you might have about the process and acquiring and processing of family history materials. And if you don't have any questions ahead of time, maybe you will have some when our panel discussion is almost over. So the plan is that we discuss about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we have up to 15 minutes for any question that pops into your minds. So you feel you feel free to enter any questions you might have into the chat, and I will ask those at the end in a Q&A session, or you can ask them yourself and unmute yourself. And I will plan to stop this whole discussion about 5 minutes before 2 p.m. so that everyone has enough time to go to the next session that starts at 2 p.m. So, well, unless we run out of questions, in this case, we are earlier done. Before we start with the first question, please allow me a few minutes, maybe a couple of minutes, about the importance of family history materials to speak on here. So what are those materials? When we think in terms of family history, many people first think about parish and court records, about census and naturalization records. That's where we go first. These records are important, but they are what we call the genealogy part of family history. These records, and I like to call them the skeleton records, help us to establish the ancestral lines with mostly just names and dates and no more. But as you know, family history is much more. Family history related documents are putting the meat on a skeleton of genealogy. These documents breathe life into an ancestral chart. They connect events or social or political circumstances to a name of an ancestor. And where do we find these documents? Well, very often in the form of a diary or letters in some dusty attic or in a box stored in a garage. And sometimes these materials are forgotten until the older generation dies and the younger generation goes through everything to determine what is worth keeping and what to carry off to the dump. And sometimes, luckily for us, this posterity has an idea to donate some of these materials to local universities or libraries. And if the creator of these documents, let's say a diary, was a local leader in a community or in an important church office, the content of these documents could be interesting to historians or to organizations that are mentioned therein. And if he wasn't a leader, the posterity of a future generation might be interested in learning something about the circumstances their ancestor faced in his or her life. And at this point, our curators and digital content managers start to become involved in this process. And I'm grateful that some of those experts were willing to sacrifice some of their time and be part of this panel discussion. And also a big thank you to Azra from Salt Lake County Library, who is the technical support in this session. So she will pay attention to the chat since I can see it, and also mute you if you forgot to mute yourself. And with this, let's start the first question. I just need to open the right document with my question. Here we go. Okay, let's start. And please, our panelists, please unmute yourself. You don't need to be muted. How would you determine what types of family history materials should be acquired? Start whoever wants to start.
I can start, sure.
Okay.
Unless anyone else wants to. Okay.
Well, go on, Gregg.
All right. So our collection scope is informed by our collection development policies. Each curator has a set of collection development policies that we maintain and that have to be approved by several bodies above us. My collection policy defines the scope of the 19th and 20th century Americana collection. And so, for example, we collect family history. So I specifically collect printed material, books, ephemera, things like that, whereas obviously John Murphy and Ryan Lee collect manuscript materials. So in my collection development policy, we talk about collecting family histories related to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as well as family histories that have content about related organizations such as the Community of Christ, as well as family history materials that relate to the history of Utah or the Mormon corridor, regardless of religious or cultural affiliations. At times, we might collect a family history because it's written by someone who's a Latter-day Saint, but that is not usually the main criteria that would justify something being collected.
John, any additional idea from your side or the input?
First, let me thank you for your excellent introduction, Milan. I thought that was a very good summary of why we acquire these materials. But my answers are similar to what Gregg gave. First, using archival and manuscript appraisal standards, we identify potential collection acquisitions that may have long-term historical value, evidentiary value, or intrinsic value. And we try to identify materials that will certainly be of long-term value to family historians and genealogists and students and scholars. Second, we rely on our, as Gregg pointed out, on our departmental collection development policies. These collection development policies provide us a blueprint or a set of objective criteria by which we evaluate potential collection acquisitions. Third, we also consult with conservators, catalogers, technical service archivists, and administrators regarding resource, staffing, infrastructure issues that may limit what we can and cannot acquire.
Wonderful, yeah. Ryan has also mentioned things that are of historical and research value and related to our primary collecting focus. So wonderful. Before we come to the Lindsey questions, it has to do with the digitization process. Lindsey, please allow me 2 more questions to the curators, and then I will ask you a question too. Okay, here's a related question to the one which I just asked here. So when you require material, do you focus on specific countries, subjects, or languages? I mean, you guys already mentioned subjects, but let's say countries and languages.
I guess I can go first this time, Milan. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, please, whoever wants to.
Again, a very good question. Unfortunately, we cannot acquire everything that may have long-term historical value. That would be impossible. We would very quickly run out of space. We instead rely on our departmental collection development policies for 19th, 20th, and 21st century manuscripts. And again, as I mentioned earlier, they provide us a blueprint and a series of criteria that we can use to evaluate potential acquisitions. In terms of family history, our collection development policies provide a set of geographical, topical, and linguistic criteria that we use to evaluate potential acquisitions. In terms of geographical focus, we limit our collection development work primarily, but I guess I would add not exclusively, to Utah, the American West, and the United States. Topically, we limit our collection development work primarily, but again, not exclusively, to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And linguistically, we acquire materials in English, as well as Spanish and other languages.
Yeah. Gregg, do you want anything?
I wouldn't add anything. That was a beautiful answer.
Yeah, wonderful, great. Let's go to the next question. Who are the main donors for family history materials to special collections? Maybe Gregg, do you want to go first this time?
Sure. So we regularly acquire family histories that have been published at any time, if they fit into our collection criteria. Most tend to be members of either the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or otherwise affiliated with BYU or the region in some way. Many are local Utah residents, but we do collect many things from other states as well. Most people are these sort of, and I'm actually reading from Ryan's answer here, I just realized, but because I had some of his answers in front of me. But so I don't know if you're going to go over those, but Ryan mentioned that many of his donors are, and my donors as well, are the official or unofficial keepers of the historical records of their family. And that is absolutely true of the donors I work with as well. I work with the best people in the world, not just my colleagues, but also the donors who we work with tend to be incredibly generous people who donate things not based on their financial value, but because they want something, preserved, for generations to come. So
Yeah.
there's sort of an insightfulness, I think, that comes with a lot of these donors that is not common.
You're right, yes. We have ignored Lindsey so far. Lindsey, do you want to add anything to our question so far, or do you just want your digital question next?
I don't have much to do with the donations themselves, besides occasionally advising the curators as they're in talks with the donors about digitization options. So yeah, I think their answers were great.
Wonderful. So now it's your question, Lindsey. Do the donors have any say in which digital format or on which online platform the material becomes available?
The answer is not a lot of say. In general, the online platform is dictated by the type of item that they're donating. So published items, things in Gregg's purview, will generally go to our platform called Internet Archive. It's a nonprofit that we partner with. It's an online library. And then the more unique manuscript items, the types that Ryan and John collect, which are more personal papers, photographs, letters, diaries, those go into the BYU's digital asset management system, which is called Content DM. Donors, when they're discussing their donations, they can request a digital copy of their items, which we may or may not be able to give them, depending on who authored the items, how long ago, whether they are still in copyright or might have privacy concerns for other members of the family. But we try to work with them and listen to their vision, or sometimes we've referred them to outside vendors who can do the digitization for them for large projects.
Thank you, Lindsey. The next question, let's start with you first. I mean, did ever a donor approach you, maybe they just have something in a digital way or format? And did they approach you? And what kind of materials would you accept?
I don't think I'm trying to think if I've ever had a donor bring digital content to me yet.
Well, if not, let's go
I
out
ever
to our
have.
curators.
No, we've got the curators who will bring us things once in a while. Born digital items are still pretty new to the world of family history. So no, I have not had them approach me yet.
Yeah. Well, before I go to our curators, let me see what Ryan here answered. Let me read it. First, we make sure the items fits with our collection development policies content-wise. If they do, we look at the format. We most often collect diaries, letters, photographs, and family histories. Originals are preferred above copies. So, John and Gregg, would you like to add anything to this question? What kind of materials do you accept?
Go ahead, Gregg.
Okay. I mean, I can't really add much to that. You know, obviously content is a big concern. I have been approached by donors with family histories that they've written that are born digital, and they are a pain, and our process is very unclear for them, in my opinion. But it's much easier for the manuscript stuff. Copyright makes things very complicated.
Oh yeah. John, do you want to add anything?
No, both Gregg and Ryan gave excellent answers. I guess just to summarize, once a decision regarding a potential acquisition has been made and following the completion of the initial appraisal process, collection materials that we tend to acquire as part of family history or Utah history related collections include journals, diaries, letters, correspondence, scrapbooks, photographs, and excuse me, family histories, autobiographies, and biographies. So
good. So that brings up the question, what family history related materials do we not accept?
We tend to defer to our family history librarians elsewhere in the library or at other institutions that specialize in these type of materials. But as you already mentioned, Milan, we do not accept genealogical materials, including things like family group sheets and pedigree charts. Much of this information is available elsewhere at other libraries, including the LDS Church Family History Library. And much of this information is now available online, of course.
Gregg or Lindsey, anything to add from your side?
I wanted to add a little bit of an addendum to my last reply. The great thing about 21st century materials is that my colleague Trevor Albert has to deal with them, not me. So that's part of why I don't know that process. Anyway, but back to the question at hand. I think John's answer covers everything. You know, we don't collect family histories, or sorry, family history records like pedigree charts. We do collect many other kinds of family history records. Again, I think our collection development policy tends to be the biggest driver of whether or not we're going to accept or reject something. Format is important, but the ultimate decision is going to rest on a material's relationship to our collection development policy, and as well as probably how much space it takes up. Those tend to be the biggest limiters on what we collect or don't collect.
That brings up the next question. Unless, Lindsey, do you want to add anything?
No.
You don't have to. Okay. Well, my thought was now, if we get this material donated, do we get a full or a conditional ownership on this material? like with conditional, for example, a commitment to retain it for a specific amount of years or forever or whatever? Or are there no conditions? How does it work when you accept something? Anyone?
John, I'd love to hear you on this.
Say that again, Greg.
I just saying I would love to hear your answer.
Oh, the special collections deed of gift that donors sign transfers physical ownership of collection materials to special collections. So it's fairly straightforward. It's a straightforward process.
Can you explain the deed of gift? What it contains a little bit?
Yeah, I should have brought up a copy of our deed of gift that I could share with everyone. I should have made that available to you, Azra. I apologize, I didn't do that in advance. But a deed of gift is a simple contractual agreement between the donor and our institution, in which they agree to transfer manuscript materials or other materials, but typically manuscript materials in their possession that they have a legal right to or legal custody to, that they wish to donate or otherwise make available to our library. In the deed of gift, it usually includes a statement as to the custodial history or provenance of the materials in question. In other words, how did the donor acquire those materials? Or where did they acquire them from? Did they inherit them? Did they purchase them? Did they create or assemble the collection? Did a family member give them to them? There are various ways that an individual can create or acquire a collection that they in turn donate to special collections. In addition, in the deed of gift, we also address issues related to copyright and copyright holding issues.
Thank you. Greg, do we get the full ownership? Do you know?
Greg, would you add anything to that?
No, I mean, that was a great answer. So just, we do sometimes sign donation agreements that obligate BYU to return materials to the donor if they are going to be discarded. Generally, that's to ensure that accidental duplicates are returned to the family. I don't think we ever sign an agreement that gives us partial physical ownership. I can't think of any situation where we would do that today anyway. And generally speaking, our copyright agreement, our deed of gift does allow individuals to state that they're sort of sharing copyright with us. There are sort of 3 levels of copyright that they can donate to BYU. Yeah, typically, so for the items I work with, it tends to be items that individuals don't have copyright control over anyway, copies of a family member's book, things like that. And when they are the author, they very rarely, if ever, want to give us copyright on top of that, but they will give us a license agreement that will give us some ability to work with the material.
Thank you. Greg, you already mentioned the word to discard. So we have the right to discard unwanted material, I suppose. It's part of the deed of gift. Okay. When you accept something, are there any physical space considerations?
I guess I can answer that one, Milan.
Okay.
Space, just like any other resource in our world, is limited. In other words, we don't have unlimited space or unlimited resources. We track and document space use. We adhere very carefully to collection development policies, and we do our very best to be wise stewards of the resources under our care. As curators, we look not only to the past, but we look to the future as well. We plan for future use, and we do our very best to assure that we will have the necessary resources to continue to manage the precious collection materials under our care. Thankfully, Of course, we have the opportunity to collaborate and work with outstanding colleagues in conservation, space planning, and archival processing and technical services who share our commitment to preserving and documenting our collective past. But yes, space is an issue, of course.
Wouldn't it be, in this case, better we just make a digital copy and say no to the original?
I'd like to hear what my colleagues have to say about that, but we prefer to acquire materials in their original format, Milan. Again, because they have evidentiary value, they have historical value as documents, and the original materials also have intrinsic value that a surrogate copy may not necessarily have. Now, digitization, of course, is an extraordinary and wonderful theme, but it's, from my perspective at least, primarily an access tool to make things available that we acquire in their original format to a wider audience.
I see.
What would you add to that, Gregg and Lindsey? I'm curious.
Lindsey, have you been in Ryan's discussions about moving to more digitized on demand sort of system?
Yes, I have. We have investigated in the past few years the possibilities inherent to requests from donors to digitize something and then return it to them, where we only keep the digital copy. It's problematic for a couple of reasons. It's hard to do. As John mentioned, first and foremost, the original physical items are valuable, and they're always our primary concern, but it's actually sometimes not in the donor's best interest ultimately to only give us a digital copy. The reasons for that is then they theoretically we would have to ask them to sign away or license either sign away the copyright or license some a willingness for us to make things accessible online in perpetuity, and maybe it turns out that they don't have the full copyright for their items, or there might be a dispute within their family about who would own that copyright, and we also have concerns about doing digitization. We don't want to accept something temporarily and digitize it if it's a fragile item. We don't want to ruin their books. I mean, not that digitization ruins it, but it is sometimes a stressful experience for items depending on what the item is. So it's rare that we have accepted just digital copies, and will probably continue to be rare based on recommendations from the committee that investigated this, as well as BYU's general counsel. That's not to say that other cultural heritage institutions don't have an interest in doing that. Other places may, and they may not be bound by the same legal restrictions that we have as a private institution. In general, government institutions might have a little bit more leeway that we do not.
Since you already mentioned the term copyright, how about the next question? When we receive 19th century or early 20th century physical materials that is already out of copyright, like a pioneer diary, for example, is it digitized by default? And if not, what are the criteria to decide if something is converted into digital format?
It's a good question. I wish very much that we could just take everything that we get, and the second we get it in the door, we digitize it and put it online. However, that's not the case. So criteria first of all, we have so many things already here that haven't been digitized. We have a queue that's quite long. I have several years worth of digitization planned out, and a lot of times the discussion is how to prioritize those things, whether some things need to be done earlier or later. So in general, some of the criteria that we look at when we're deciding what to digitize is, Ryan Lee and I always say, is everybody in it dead? Is everybody very dead? Because that makes everything easier. Are the items in public domain, meaning nobody has copyright claims on them anymore? Another one is if things may not be in public domain, then who has the copyright? That can often be a fraught question, and particularly among family items. And we also have to take into consideration any privacy concerns if there are letters that are not reflecting well on certain members of the family. Then maybe that's things that we for lack of a better term, we want to wait until more people are dead to put things online. So those are some of the things that we take into account. The curators are the ones that select which things they would like digitized, and then they bring those to me in a committee usually.
Let's ask our curators. Any comments from what Lindsey already mentioned?
Go ahead, Greg.
I really liked Ryan's answer here. Mind if I just read that?
Yeah, you can read Ryan's answer, please.
Ryan wrote that nothing is ever digitized by default. For 19th century manuscripts, and I would add 19th century books as well, most digitization decisions are based on requests from a patron, including teaching faculty, or patterns of high use of the physical object. We do track the physical use of materials in our reading room to try and determine candidates for digitization. Every month I get a report of, and this is me at this point. Every month I get a report that shows the number of times, or it lists the materials that have been collected. Sorry, that have been used by a patron in the reading room. It doesn't record who the patron was, but it does give us a sense of what's being used. And I've used that to compile digitization projects several times, pretty much annually. And yeah, I don't have anything else to add.
Good. John, any comments?
No, I think the answers that Lindsey and Ryan and Greg provided are excellent. I guess I would just add that because I work with 20th century materials, that the threshold, at least in terms of evaluating 20th century items for digitization by necessity has to be much higher, because many of the individuals represented in the collections that I acquire are still living. And so we have to be very concerned with privacy issues, particularly third-party privacy issues, as well as both federal and state requirements. And so I guess I would just suggest that it's easier to a certain extent to scan and make available online older materials than newer materials for those reasons.
Yeah.
Especially family history records or materials.
Yeah. Lindsey, when you get these originals, do you have to cut off the spine, or how do you digitize?
Oh no.
Oh no.
So we have some pretty fancy book scanners that have big, beautiful glass plates on them. They're usually open to 100 degrees, and they have a little book cradle underneath them with that's kind of adjustable depending on the width of the spine. So we'll pop our books in there, and that's a pretty gentle process on books for the most part. So when it comes to manuscripts, things like letters and diaries, those can be either shot from an overhead camera, just having something on a table, or they can be shot on a flatbed.
So nobody needs to be afraid of its originals.
Ooh, no.
That's great. I will skip the next question since we kind of already answered it. Then is there any involvement of the teaching faculty in a selection of donations? That's more a question to our curators.
So I have acquired some rare family histories at the request of a family history professor in the past. It was a bit outside my normal collecting area, but not so far that I felt like it was inappropriate to acquire the material. We are thrilled head over heels to acquire items that professors are actually interested in using.
Well, maybe the next question to John. Are there any guidelines or suggestions what the donor can do with materials that we do not accept here at the library?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Again, we cannot acquire everything that's created, of course. And if we speak with a donor regarding a primary source collection or collections that we may not have an interest in, or materials that do not fall within the parameters of our collection development policies, we always refer them to another institution, another appropriate institution that may have an interest in the same materials. And we do that on a regular basis.
That's wonderful.
So we really try to work with our prospective donors to help them find good homes for their primary source collection. So even though we may not, even though those materials may not have interest to us in terms of our collection development policies, we do help our donors, our prospective donors, find good homes for materials.
Great. So now let's go back to Lindsey again. How would you describe the process of selecting and approving a digitization project? You already mentioned that you meet with the curators. Do you want anything else to add?
Yeah, the curators will select items either based on donor interest or patron interest or a faculty member's interest. They'll work with myself and our catalogers to evaluate the item, look how well its cataloging work has been done. That's an important part of having a digitized item, is we don't want to just put images online. We want to make sure that, you know, the title and author date, all of that information is there so that people can understand what they're looking at and perhaps go find related items. And then just depending on the size of the items selected, if it's a large project, say a family papers that consist of several boxes worth, it goes on to a committee that consists of all the stakeholders, some catalogers, the current head of special collections, myself, and somebody from our preservation area. So the committee approves it. Then our digital lab will receive the items, review them, plan out, decide which machines we should use to be most gentle on the items, actually do the digitization according to, there's a federal standard that we seek to hit. We have the highest level of technology here in our lab, and so we can hit what's called the 4-star standard. And then we'll do a quality check. We'll upload the items to their online repository, and then either deliver a private copy to the donors or take our master copies and preserve them in our digital preservation software.
Yeah, you mentioned time. How long does it take from start to finish?
It really depends on the item. If we really, I usually say something that has about 300 pages. If we really decided to prioritize that and ground everything else in the lab to a halt, that would maybe take about 72 hours to do. But in general, with the metadata work involved, and it can take a while depending on how big it is. For example, we've been working on a set of 6 boxes worth of diaries. I can't remember. I wish Ryan was here to tell me how many diaries there are in the Charles Orr card. I know there was over 100. It was like 160 diaries. That's taken us about a year to complete, but we also are completing several other projects. That one wasn't prioritized. So just an example of
and which resolution do you use usually when you scan it?
For Internet Archive items, anywhere between 3 and 650 PPI, and then for manuscript items that are going to have digital preservation done on the master copies. For printed items, it's usually 400 PPI, and then for photographic items, it depends on the size of the photograph, anywhere between 6 and 1200 PPI.
And is it all done in color, the digitization?
Yes, no black and white.
No black and white anymore.
Grayscale.
And you don't go back and rescan material in color if we have the original here.
We actually do that for some of our Internet Archive items. If we see that there's a black and white microfilm copy put onto Internet Archive, we say, oh, we can do better than that. We might as well. Internet Archive scanning tends to be faster than the laborious 4-star scanning. So we will sometimes scan things and make a replacement copy. Yeah.
Thank you, Lindsey. So it's actually 1:47 already. I mean, I have enough question to keep you busy for another hour, but Azra, do we have any questions from the chat? Because I cannot see the chat right now.
Gregg has done an excellent job of taking care of the chat section. So he has answered almost every question that we have received. There's one question that we just got from Valerie. What's an example of something exciting that you've acquired and or digitized recently? Ooh, that's a good question, Valerie.
I really hope I didn't overstep myself in answering those chat questions. I realized afterwards that I probably shouldn't have done that. So
no, you all fine.
Not at all, Gregg. You did a great job.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is for the question about do we digitize copyright protected items? Yeah, we will follow fair use and sometimes do ILL where you can do, maybe one chapter of a book, something small, but not in general reproducing whole items.
Yeah, but back to Valerie's question, what was your favorite part you ever digitized?
I have one.
Good.
Several years ago, as part of a joint or collaborative project with the British Scouting Association in the UK, we scanned and digitized special collections, that is, scanned and digitized the papers of Lord Baden-Powell, the founder of the International Scouting Movement. The Baden-Powell collection includes extensive correspondence, and several months ago I spoke to an individual in Denmark as well as another person in England who indicated that they were able to find answers to some of their personal family history questions in that scanned collection. Normally a family historian would not turn to the Baden-Powell papers for answers to family history questions, but at least for these two family historians, they found exactly what they needed. And so that was exciting for me personally to see this very important collection that we were able to work with our British colleagues in scanning. It was nice to see it put to use in this manner in which it could be utilized by family historians.
I can show you one of my favorites if I can share my screen, or maybe not. I'll just describe it. It was called a Ciphering Journal. It's this math teacher in Vermont in the 1700s, William Blaisdell, had this journal. It was badly burned on one side, so it was actually kind of a difficult one to scan. We had to be careful of the burned pages, but this little guy, every page of the journal was just filled with math equations, and he was calculating the volume of his barn or how long the shadows would work on different parts of his farm. And it was just really cute to look at. It was just mesmerizing to see how complicated math was in the 1700s. And at the very end of the journal, he just happens to record his family tree. So we liked it because it showed the history of math, but also he just has his history down there at the very end of it. And it's just a really visually beautiful and really interesting item to look at.
Lindsey, I just changed the settings and enabled you to share your screen.
It's a cutie. Here's Mr. Blaisdell's journal. So you can see the front of it's really, really burned right here in the middle. And my favorite page, I think, is page 100, or maybe it's 200. I can't remember. Yeah, he just did math all the time. So much math. And I'm just amazed at how much he was able to do with no calculator. You can see he's doing some astronomy.
Wonderful.
Beautiful. And then at the very end, let me see if I can find his, so there's his births and deaths, and there's a little piece from the dealer or whoever it was. Yeah, there's this history that he recorded at the very end. So that's always been my favorite.
That's incredible. I love that. I love ephemera. So anything that someone hands you that you would normally, that anyone with any sense would throw away, I like to collect and put in our beautiful library. So we digitized a nice set of 19th century ephemera a couple years ago, and I'll put a link to it in the chat if anyone is really curious about it. But it's just a bunch of, tracks, programs, flyers, most related to the history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I think all of them actually. Some maybe a little bit more general to Utah, but I'm a big fan of history in the moment, seeing what, trying to think what was life like for someone. Oh, here's a really good one. I'll link it in the chat one more time, hopefully. It's a Utah Yacht Club certificate from 1870-ish. And it's so cool to think about, why was this created? Who would have joined this? And, it can add context, maybe something that some family historian finds, So if you've got some journal from somebody in Utah in the 1870s saying, yeah, I went out on my yacht today. I've never seen such a thing, but maybe it exists. That would be really interesting.
Nice. Do we have any other questions from the chat in the meantime? Ezra?
No, we do not.
Okay.
But this is a good time for anyone to ask one last question before we wrap up the session.
While people are thinking, I will add that another one of my favorite things is in that collection, Greg, is I love looking at the tender, the money from different periods. I just think it's so cool to see what they would use as, their little private currencies.
Well, if you don't have a question, maybe, sorry, Greg.
I'll just link one of those pieces of currency in there. Most of you will have seen this before, but yeah, anyway. Sorry, go ahead, Milan.
No, I was just going, since nobody else asked anything, just one last question here, and then I will wrap up here. What are the family history related online collections that are mostly used? Do we have any statistics or something like this? Or is it difficult to take statistics?
No, that's something I'm actually working on, is doing a bit more thorough analysis of our data analytics for digitized content. I feel like, just from a feedback perspective, we have a lot of digitized newspapers, which has relevance to family history. A lot of times we have a lot of people interested in our digitized newspapers. We have a collection called the Mormon Missionary Diaries, and I think those are well, their history and their family history both, and people will look through their names of people mentioned in those diaries. What else we got?
Lindsey?
Yeah.
I would mention the Overland Trails collection.
That's right. So the Overland Trails is a number of types of works. There's maps, there's letters, there's journals. They're all collected by the types they are, and they represent the migration of many different peoples across America, and their different their personal histories and their experiences, and those are very popular as well.
Right, so we have 1:55. So unfortunately, our time is over. As I already mentioned, we could speak at least an hour more. So a big thank you to our panelists for this interesting discussion on family history related donation and its digitization process, or the aspects of it. Azra, if you can give me a last time the screen share rights, I would like to get one more slide up.
You're welcome to share your screen, Milan. You have the...
Oh, okay. Okay, now let's see. Can you see it right now? The contact information? Or can you not?
We cannot.
Oh, okay. Then I don't know. where to click here.
So a bottom of your screen, you should see the option share screen.
It's unfortunately not here anymore.
Oh, sorry,
Some-
give me
some
a
are.
second. Yes, I can change that. Can you do it now?
I don't see it. Well,
What about now?
you are the host. I see now this one, but where do I go now from here?
So
Because
bottom of your screen, you should see the option where it says share screen.
here we
little
go,
green
because I
arrow.
had to click another thing to see it. All right,
Okay.
here we go. So let me share this screen here. And then share. You can see here the contact information, hopefully now. Can you see it?
Yes, we can. Thank
Oh,
you, Milan.
wonderful. So if you have any questions, any specific questions that come to your mind later on and you want to ask our panelists directly, you have their email addresses here, or if it's just a general one, contact special collections at byu.edu. So thank you very much again to our audience too for participating here, for listening, and also for the Q&A. And feel free to go now into either your well-deserved break or the next presentation. And that's it.
Thank you, Milan. You did a great job. Appreciate you a lot.
Thanks, Milan.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
everyone too for participating.
Thank you, Milan. This was a treat.
Can
And
you
thanks to all of our
please-
presenters.
Yeah, can you stop the recording now?
Yes.
Wonderful. So I guess it is stopped.
Milan, did you stop the recording?
Oh, I have to stop it.
Yes, because
Sorry.
I made you a host.
Oh.